Let's kick off, because I can see that we've got quite a lot of participants kind of making their way in now. So Mark, thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to introduce Mark. I mean, let's be honest, Mark, you don't take a huge amount of introduction that's needed, but you know, a practicing veterinary surgeon, broadcaster, author, animal welfare campaigner, celebrity friend. I think there is many ways that we can kind of introduce yourself. But thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, everybody.
This is hopefully going to be a little bit different to your normal kind of webinars. It's the idea. It's a lot more of a chilled out kind of honest sort of chat, not just about the great things that you're doing, but also a lot more to do with the kind of mental health side, how people can support, and obviously there is tons and tons of puppy related questions that people are obviously dying to find out as well. So Mark, welcome. I'm going to kick it off straight away and say, for those that don't understand or know Lucy's Law in simple terms, have a chance to explain what Lucy's Law is to those of us that may not know.
Okay, well, first of all, thanks, Ashley, for inviting me on. I love this sort of midday chat, and I'm having tea. I don't know what you're having.
Coffee. It's about the third one. I'm looking after my boy all day today, so but
okay.
you're about four coffees in before you start.
It's more. You need that rather than you're enjoying it.
Exactly.
I've got my Larry David Curb Your Enthusiasm Latte Larry's mug, which I'm very proud of.
Very good.
So Lucy's Law. Okay, so that's the rosette I'm proudly wearing there. Lucy's Law, and there she is, little Lucy. So little Lucy was an ex-breeding dog from a licensed Welsh puppy farm, whose puppies were sold via third parties. So, for example, pet shops. We were campaigning anyway in Westminster, a group of us, to ban the third-party sale of commercial puppies and kittens. So to ban the sale of puppies and kittens without their mum. We had the Where's Mum campaign. We launched Pup Aid. It was a group of grassroots campaigners, and we kept hitting brick wall after brick wall. So we really needed to sort of rebrand the campaign and make some progress. Yeah. And I was actually spaying a husky bitch one day at my practice when I was working down the coast in a place called Peacehaven, just down from Brighton. And it just came to me that, you know, Lucy sadly passed away in December 2016. 2017, we were struggling with the campaign. We were hitting all sorts of obstacles. And so I thought if we rebranded this sort of quite a confusing the campaign to ban the third-party commercial sale of puppies and kittens and simplify it by honouring little Lucy, who sadly just passed away. It personalised the campaign. It was a fantastic alliteration. It made a great hashtag. And that's really took us to the next stage of getting closer to changing the law. So it was honouring little Lucy, who was one of the funniest. You know, when you see these broken dogs coming out of puppy farms, they've had their soul ripped out of them. You know, they are broken, empty, you know, staring dogs. And the work that went into her rehabilitation by a girl called Lisa Garner, who ran the page called Lucy the Rescue Cavalier on Facebook, which is still live, and I encourage everyone to check out. She, you know, Lucy wore little clothes, and she'd go to events and be cuddled by celebrities, and she became this sort of social media superstar herself and got a following of over 70,000 likes. So it was a no-brainer for me to not just honour her, but then to engage that sort of pre-existing army of 70,000 people who loved Lucy, who were mourning her, who were angry about why she was so ill. You know, she had arthritis, separation anxiety, dry eye, all sorts of issues. And she lived 3 years in freedom after 5 years in a puppy farm. So it all kind of made sense to name Lucy's Law. So we went through the whole process in... and
it was quite a long process, wasn't it?
yeah, you could say. It was over 10 years, and eventually we got it over the line. So now in England only, and it's significant that we say that today, I'll tell you that in a minute, but in England only, it's illegal now to sell a puppy without its mum and away from the place it was born. And that was always important about accountability. There is a loophole in the law which DEFRA, the government, kindly, generously put in just as the legislation came in. They sabotaged their own legislation, and we can talk about that later too.
Yeah, we'll touch on that.
And also, the reason it's significant that it's in England is because today Wales debates Lucy's Law in their parliament with a view to bringing it in September. Scotland have already done that, and they're bringing it in September too. in September as well this year, and Northern Ireland have already started the process. So the aim really when we started campaigning was to make sure that every time someone wanted a puppy, which is again totally fine, the breeder was accountable and you saw the puppy interacting with its mum, preferably its siblings as well, in the place it was born, as the first stage really in ending puppy farming. Yeah.
It's incredible. I mean, I think there was, when I was talking to you last, over 300 visits spanning across, was it 6 years that you had?
It was about just over 300 visits to Westminster in 6 years. And the last, I'd say 20 to 30 of those were all in number 10. And as soon as you start having meetings in number 10, I mean, it's mind blowing. Still can't actually get my head around what happened. It's like someone else did it. It's really weird. That's when you know you're close. And just a little tip, a little campaigning tip we'll start with. When you are having meetings in number 10 and you're close to changing the law, don't tell everyone you're at number 10 and about to change the law. I see it so many times with other campaigners. Be quiet, be private, be really, really discreet, because you're going to sabotage your own campaign. Yeah. Have that picture outside, either when you're handing a petition in or when you've done it. Don't do it when you're, because the enemy just ramps up the opposition. And I've seen it happening with other campaigns. So it's so tempting when you're outside to tell your followers outside the famous door, which is amazing. And I never get used to being
I was going to say, so what's it like? What is number 10 like for those of us?
Massive, absolutely massive. It's so big in there. It's really deceiving. So you go in and, you know, down the hall, there's the cabinet room and there's all these rooms and staircases and it goes down, it goes up. There's the adjoining door to number 11, what's called the Prime Minister's flat. It's not a flat, it's a 3-story mansion behind number 11. The artwork in there is incredible. Larry the cat is always there when you go. You know, he's usually when you go in on the left, lying on the radiator. We've had a garden party there. You know, Lucy's Law, when they announced it in 2018 in August, they gave us a garden party to celebrate. So we took celebrities and we took the campaigners that we've been so almost family with for the last few years. But we also really significantly took ex-breeding dogs that have been rescued from puppy farms. And one of the charities that we work with, Friends of Animals Wales, volunteer run, based obviously in Wales, who ended up supplying Dylan to the Prime Minister and his fiancée. They brought some dogs with them to the garden party. And not only were they running around the garden, these dogs that have been incarcerated and licensed to puppy farms, but Downing Street Kitchen actually baked them bone-shaped biscuits, which they were eating around. And that for me was it was such a poignant moment in terms of how we flipped it. You know, these dogs that have been absolutely imprisoned in horrible conditions are now running around one of the most famous residences in the world, eating like purposely baked treats. So there was so much of that during the campaigning where you just had to take a step back and go, is this actually really happening? Because we'd created it, tiny little group of us had created this change. And it's not, you know, it's thanks to everyone that supported us and signed petitions and shared petitions that people power kind of won over the bureaucracy that was sort of stopping us, sabotaging us, blocking us. And eventually we got there for the dogs.
It's a really, really good point here, because I think when you look at the time that obviously that you were campaigning or you know, fighting to campaign to get this law passed, did you ever lose hope, or did it ever feel like it was losing momentum at certain times? How did you kind of stay buoyant during those sort of times? How did you keep going?
There was so many times when we just thought it wasn't necessarily we're not going to do this. It was more, how are we going to get this over the line, or how are we going to negotiate the next obstruction? Because they were coming from all over the place, and people who know the story will pretty much know that, you know, we were up against the government to start with. We were up against the pet industry, which is no easy obstruction. And we were up against, at one point, the 4 biggest animal welfare charities in the UK, who, for various reasons, didn't want us to succeed. And when you're a group of 5 or 6 grassroots campaigners with no resources, apart from imagination, I would say that, and creativity, and you're up against these giants of our sector, whether it's the organizations, whether it's the industry, whether it's the government itself, with every resource possible, money, you know, dedicated PR teams, etc., public affairs officers, it's quite daunting. But to be honest with you, I played a lot of chess when I was younger with my dad, and I think the part of my brain that is good at strategy was working overtime, and also he was in advertising, so I had a creative streak as well as being a vet. So we came up with all these sort of publicity ideas and just ways to keep the campaign going. But there were times when we just thought, what are we going to do next? And my inspiration, I have to say, is my grandma, who was 100 yesterday. And she escaped the Holocaust, and how she escaped the Holocaust was she was actually 17, so she was too old to get on the kinder transport, which is what the government set up to rescue 10,000 children to bring them over from Nazi Germany. And she was about to be sent to Auschwitz, where her parents had just been sent. But she ducked under the barriers at Leipzig train station. She went to a fancy dress shop, bought a Red Cross sort of nurse's uniform, came back to the train station and pretended to be a nurse helping the children. And that's how she escaped. And she was the only one of 10,000 children that arrived in the UK who didn't have someone waiting for them. So she went from being hated as a Jewish teenager in Germany to being hated as a German young adult in the UK. So with no one to help her. So she made her own life, and she taught me from a very young age, never to give up and anything's possible. So that was always my sort of default setting campaigning. It was like, we will get there. We just sometimes don't know why. And some of the decisions that went against us, I didn't really work that out till maybe 2 years later why that hadn't happened. But there's so much going on behind the scenes in Westminster and with all these organisations. You just have to be prepared to play the long game, and that's also the chess mentality. You will 100%. Get there if what you're campaigning for is the right thing to do, which was to make all breeders accountable. Yeah.
And going back to the campaigns, I suppose the initial kind of Lucy's Law campaign did lead to another campaign that you're very much behind, which is to ban puppy imports. What can you tell us about this campaign? Why is it so important? How can people get behind it? What can you tell us about that?
Well, that's a very good question. When Lucy's Law came in England, pretty much about a year ago, well, just beginning of April last year, what they did, frustratingly, was that they said in the course of a business, instead of all puppies having to be seen at the breeder's premises interacting with the mum in the place they were born, we will lift those protections in the course of a business, and to prevent COVID to COVID human transmission. So puppies are allowed to be delivered. And we were like, oh, really? Thank God it's temporary and it will go back. But it meant that accountability was obviously questionable. So you'd have responsible breeders, in which there are many of, delivering pups, because the idea was one person delivers to a family rather than a whole family comes to get a puppy. And so you had people, responsible breeders delivering. You had the rescue, obviously rescues shut down. They couldn't have any visitors. But you also had questionable breeders, let's say in puppy farms in Wales or puppy farms overseas, that were sending dogs to the UK for this huge demand. And the high profile case that I'm pretty sure most people would have heard of was the Love Island couple, Mr. Chai, Pomeranian, that was imported as a good. It wasn't imported as a puppy, it was imported as a good. And it was couriered straight to the new owner's address. It died after 6 days for lots of problems it had. But my point is, when Lucy's Law came in England, DEFRA actually introduced what I mentioned earlier, a loophole into its own legislation. And they did that to prevent there ever being a shortage of puppies in the UK. And this loophole is being exploited at the moment quite legally by two puppy dealers in the northwest of England who are importing puppies from a puppy farm in Northern Ireland because they are the breeders of the pups. So the breeders don't actually have to be in the same country. It's a tiny minutiae of the legislation. We challenged it. Boy, did we challenge it. One of the most uncomfortable conversations I've ever had on Zoom with the minister. So it was important, really, to almost like a Lucy's Law Part 2, to close that loophole down. And so me and my gang of campaigners, we don't give up. And we again, you sort of backtrack, you go into your shell, you try and work out a strategy. And the strategy based mainly around that dead puppy from the Love Island couple was to ban puppy imports. of young puppies, increase the minimum age to from 15 weeks is what it is already for import, to 26 weeks. So that's just another 11 weeks. And what that does is, first of all, it makes puppies unsaleable because no one really wants a 6-month-old pup. So you're kind of killing the market, but you can't say that out loud because DEFRA get nervous that you're challenging World Trade Organization rules by sort of favoring British bred pups. So you've got to sort of go, well, first of all, it's good for public health because not only do they have one rabies jab, they have two. They have the full course. You exceed the incubation period for the virus. So already the puppies that are coming in are rabies free. You are making them more robust to travel because at the moment they're too fragile and a lot of them die en route or when they get here. The most important thing about increasing that age to 6 months is the enforcement, because puppies' teeth, their secondary adult teeth, their permanent dentition comes through at 6 months. And that's one of the only things that is almost impossible to fake, right? All the documents, all the passports, it can all be faked, even microchips. But you can't fake the age the teeth come through. So in terms of enforcement, not only at border control and visual checks can people easily be trained to see the difference between a 6-month puppy mouth and anything beforehand, but even with the illegal puppy trade, puppies that have been illegally imported, as soon as they go to the vet, whether they're sick or for their first or second jabs, that vet can go, that's too young. Where did you get it from, and start an investigation. So the 6-month thing is very, very important. We've made loads of progress. The campaign got 100,000 signatures on in 6 weeks on its government e-petition. Still hasn't been debated. And we think that some good stuff happening behind the scenes, and it's a case of watch this space. Yeah. We've kind of done everything possible we can so far. Lots of RSPCA have been fantastic in this, and lots of other organizations, weirdly, unlike Lucy's Law, have formed a sort of consensus against the government, and even government bodies like Conservative Animal Welfare Federation, the EFRA Select Committee, who scrutinise DEFRA. Everyone's on the same page with this one. So we're hopeful that this year we'll see some progress made on that particular campaign. And then, of course, that closes down a whole load of irresponsibly bred pups coming into the UK. And we're sort of cleaning up. We've got Lucy's Law in England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. We've got the ban of puppies coming in that are under 6 months. All of a sudden, it becomes a lot, not so much easier to get a pup, but the accountability is there and the quality is there rather than sort of quantity. So we're sort of cleaning up the industry, law by law and country by country.
And I suppose it kind of leads me to this next question, because this is something that one of our key pillars is really kind of trying to educate the public what ethical breeding looks like and the sort of questions. Now, as a nation, we are dog lovers, but we are so uneducated still as a nation. In your opinion, from professional and as a campaigner, why do you think that is? And what can we do collectively to better our knowledge when it comes to what to look for if you are looking to buy a puppy or adopt a puppy, for example?
I think that it's just the impulse, isn't it? The human impulse, which again isn't a bad thing, because if we're animal lovers, we love animals. The definition of an animal lover. I think it's very, very hard to get in the way of that emotional journey that you make once you see something that you like. Now, it's a fascinating area, this, lots of psychology involved, why as humans we feel the need to have something. And I think when a puppy's looking up at you from across the screen, you just want it. And it may not be the pup that you end up with. It may be a scam. It may be an irresponsibly bred pup. It may be a responsibly bred pup. It may be a rescue pup. However, we tend to, I think, cut corners and just do anything we can to have that animal. And then you get a scenario where if that animal is injured or diseased or struggling or compromised, we then go, right, we'll rescue it. And I think that's a lot of what happens with two situations. One is when people go somewhere, see the pup that was advertised and it's not sort of in good condition, they go, right, we need to get this out, which again, totally understand. Very few animal lovers could walk away, which is often suggested. But I think if you are going to do that, just accumulate as much evidence as you can, because that goes into then an investigation. The other thing is certain breeds whose welfare is compromised, like the brachycephalic dogs, the pugs, the Frenchies, for example. I think a lot of people look at them and think they look like babies. It releases our sort of oxytocin, and we want to nurture. And the more those animals struggle, the more we want to help them. So there's all sorts of weird neural pathways going on that sort of, as I say, they increase our oxytocin levels, which is that sort of need to nurture. And to get in the way of that with any form of education or awareness campaigns, good luck. So that's why, more importantly, the options that are available to people have to be sort of more locked down. So it gives people less sort of leeway, if you like, to make the wrong decision or a worse decision. So we're basically providing accountability of the source and saying, if you do it properly, then you should get a decent, well-bred pup. And it's obviously, and it's also worth waiting for. And it's not everyone's right to have a dog either. That's the other thing with this whole demand and supply. If you have, we've got an overpopulation of dogs at the moment, and you need that if you want the choice. If you want everyone to have a choice of pup, there's no way of doing it without having an overpopulation and lots of options. And that's scary. And I think people shouldn't necessarily be able to have a pup just like that. And it'd be interesting to see where we come out of lockdown, how many of dogs were sort of purchased at the beginning just as something to do or just to tick a box of companionship. And then lockdown's over, everyone goes back to normal. Well, we don't really need this dog anymore. And it's kind of costing us money, and it needs walking, and it poos, So it's a real, I'm sure with what you do as well, you're watching this space in anticipation and preparing to be probably quite disappointed with humans again.
It literally is. The next question I've got written down here is, lockdown was first introduced, the first lockdown, a year ago today, and during that time there has been so much coverage when it comes to puppies. I think everyone can safely say that they have a huge proportion of their friends that have now looked at getting a puppy or thought about it, or whether that's shelter dogs, for example. What problems do you see arising from puppies, very healthy puppies still, during the pandemic? We touched on things like separation anxiety. As from a veterinary perspective, what sort of issues do you think that will be good for people to start making some changes now, or start being able to kind of help support?
I think with the separation anxiety, this will potentially be more serious than everyone can imagine. If people do end up going back to work, that's definitely something that all owners can prepare for. Making sure your dog is set up to succeed without you being around. And I can't emphasize enough, if you don't know how to do that, then ask a behaviorist. There's plenty of dog behaviorists out there. There's some simple steps to take, but just treat it seriously and treat it professionally as soon as you possibly can. Because the last thing you need is, dog welfare wise, your dog goes into a massive panic attack when you're not around, or when you've gone to work, and starts soiling and barking and scratching at the doorposts. Also, it can affect, relationships with your neighbors if your dog's howling. It's a really serious sort of social problem, as well as a canine welfare problem. And interestingly, it's one of the problems that makes it more likely for people to abandon their dogs into a shelter. Worth noting, there's a charity called Support Dogs, whose dogs, detect autism and epilepsy and other disabilities, who are working with charities to take some of the worst separation anxiety dogs and turn them into support dogs, because obviously they don't leave their side for 24/7. So there is a kind of an outlet available, which I find fascinating. The other massive problem, I think, is because of social distancing and isolation, we have these puppies that were purchased last year haven't had the opportunities to socialize enough or at all with other dogs and other humans. So I think a lot of dogs will be fearful going forward in just meeting other people and other dogs, which is really, really serious as well, because you could, get cases of nervous aggression, for example, off the back of it. And as soon as a dog starts biting another dog or a human, you've got some real issues there, and a potential euthanasia.
It's a very, very good point. It's exactly why pausing work, the whole concept of the puppy therapy, it's exactly why we do what we do, is to be able to socialize that puppy in a way that meets the 5 animal welfare needs. It's what leads to having a license. And I suppose that is another kind of very important question with companies that aren't necessarily licensed, that are looking to ways to socialize your puppies or your litters. What are the issues that can surround that for companies that are not licensed, that don't demonstrate those 5 animal welfare needs? What can be the concerns for that?
I think as soon as you compromise an animal's welfare without providing one of the 5 basic needs, which I'm surprised not everybody knows about the 5 needs of the Animal Welfare Act 2006, and it's worth just looking at them and sharing them, because everything shared is another opportunity to raise awareness. But as soon as you compromise an animal's welfare, it has implications not just for that animal, but also for the human involved in that relationship as well. So there's really no excuse to do the basics well. Obviously, we want people to do more than the basics. But I think everyone has the capacity and the resources to do the basics well. And as soon as you've done that, you've already made progress, not just for the animals' welfare, but yours as well. Absolutely.
I know you mentioned with the likes of the kind of steps that we can make to be able to reintroduce puppies. Something that we are looking to do is almost to do a roadmap very soon. So if you do follow us on social, do keep an eye on that, because we'll be showing a reintroduction map, little tips that you can do to help socialise your pups before going straight back to work. And also we'll follow up with some very key bits of information after this. You mentioned support dogs. Funnily enough, couple of guys, including myself in the team, we've recently partnered with support dogs and signed up to do a virtual London marathon. So it seemed a good idea at the time. Not a big fan of running, but like I say, it's all creating that awareness, and it's important. It's important to spread that good kind of work that people are doing. Mark, let's talk about mental health. So a big part of what we do as a company is obviously the socialization. It's the puppies. It's what we all love. And another element to the company, which is just as important and where it all ties in, is the mental health side. So there's various bits, and the reason why I think this is so important is the veterinary sector as a whole has a stigma attached to it when it comes to mental health. Very high suicide rates, very alarming numbers. In your experience, why is that? What can you tell us about the veterinary practices as a whole?
I think there's 2 factors to the high suicide rate with vets and veterinary staff. I think it's been like that for years. Ever since I became a vet 25 years ago, it was always talked about. I think there's 2 reasons. One is, as vets, we have access to stuff to euthanize us. Large animal vets have firearms. Small animal vets will have, the stuff we use to put animals to sleep, plus drips and all the rest of it. So I think one aspect of it is we can do it, which is really scary and quite sinister. The other thing I think is to mention is there's such an expectation, more so I think now than ever before, by clients, by owners, to get that pet right. And I just think it's a pressure that is... Obviously, we, as humans, we're not terribly good at talking about stuff. As a profession, we're expected to get animals better, and animals don't get better all the time. And sometimes they get worse, and sometimes we don't know why they get worse. The other thing that's worth noting is, NHS is free, and people don't understand how much stuff costs with regard to anaesthetics, with regard to drugs, with regard to staffing an emergency clinic. To provide that service overnight means people get paid more overnight. Now, as vets, as animal lovers, everybody would love it if we just did everything for free. And I think a lot of people do expect us to do everything for free, or can't understand why things cost so much. And I think a lot of that's down to the communication between the veterinary practice and the client. But I think there's an expectation, weirdly, to get that pet better and to do it for nothing. And I think when you veer from that, i.e. things don't get better, they get worse, or they have to be put to sleep, and they cost a lot of money, that's where you get this sort of pressure sort of building up, if you like, between that client and the vet practice relationship. And also, do you know what? Sometimes it's so busy that you're compromised as a vet. Most vets, they consult in the morning, They'll then do a few operations. They'll then do paperwork. They'll then consult again, and you go home. And you don't really have a break in the day to sort of take in some of the enormous decisions that you're making. You know, the decision for surgery, the decision to put something to sleep, the decision to, you know, change treatment. These are all massive decisions. It's part of our job. I'm not saying, oh, if you can't do it, then, you know, don't do the job. But it's a huge expectation every time to get it right, because at the end of the day, you care so much about the animals and you want them to do well, you know, and obviously to last as long as possible, pain and suffering free. So there's many factors that we take on as just our job, but you know, we struggle with. We don't just go home at night and forget about everything. We think about those patients. I mean, I haven't vetted for 2 years because of my campaigning, but I loved the keeping all the communication channels open. I had no problem telling people, I don't know what's wrong with your dog, but we're going to do this, and this. I want you to call me in an hour, and then we're going to work together to get your dog better, rather than here's a load of tablets and you know, sort of never see you again. So the communication is equally as important with the practice, with the individual vets and nurses and receptionists and the client. But it's all about just talking through everything and making everything as transparent as possible, giving estimates to people. I saw that when I was locuming for years. You know, giving someone a bill when they come in to pick their dog up that you haven't gone through is horrible for that client. And I've also found over the years that people don't have a problem paying for stuff as long as they feel it's worth it. And that goes for restaurants, it goes for bars, it goes for cars. People don't mind shelling out if they think it's value for money. And I think that in itself, if you're explaining how much stuff costs, giving people the options, not just sort of doing it and expecting them to pay, especially at the moment, especially in the last few years when people haven't got those resources money-wise, then you're giving people ownership of the decision making that goes into how much that bill is going to be. You know, sometimes you can be operating and you come across something that you weren't expecting. So maybe you now have to take the spleen out, for example, and that's extra hour or so, can be for some surgeons. So it's surgery is usually priced time-wise. So it just takes someone to go, can you just call that owner, say, we're on the table, we found a lump in the spleen, it's going to cost another couple of £100, and just let them know. And it's the letting people know that's crucial, because as long as you're transparent and honest. And also another thing I used to pride myself on is it's kind of doing the basics and then working and seeing how it goes, rather than doing everything possible, because everything possible can happen in terms of finding a diagnosis, but sometimes it's the response to the initial treatment that sort of diverts you into that path of finding the end diagnosis. And some things just get better with the basic treatment. So I'm quite old school. I used to just keep communication channels open, be brutally honest with people. And, you know, if there was a bill that was big, they knew when they came to pick that dog up and had made the provisions, if necessary, to pay for it. And most people were thankful. Most people didn't mind waiting in waiting rooms, because they know the service that they were going to get when they went into the vet was the best service, because I'd given them my time and my expertise equally to everybody. So there are things that as a veterinary profession, I think we can do to prevent that sort of depression and anxiety. And I think it's all about communication, you know, talking to your fellow staff, but mainly the being transparent to your clients, because we all care, and it's because we care that we get ourselves into these emotional messes, I think.
And I think there's a big value in doing some of the basics. That's what insurance is there for. It's amazing how many people I speak to that avoid getting insurance for their dogs, and I think, or make that decision very, very quickly, assuming that all insurances are exactly the same. And I think from my advice would be, just do your research. You know, it's like just as important. Do it right from the beginning, because you're better to be safe than sorry. And all of a sudden, it's the financial side of it is just a burden that you do not want to be thinking about when you want your dog, cat, horse, any animal to be getting better. Marc, you're very much in the spotlight when it comes to TV media for the great work that you do, from your campaigns and obviously from your veterinary kind of support as well. How how does it affect you being in the media so much when it comes to some of these decisions? You know, do you ever get overwhelmed by the amount of attention that's there? Do you ever wish that some days you could just kind of slip back into sort of old Mark and be able to just kind of carry on with your normal life, so to speak?
It's all about finding the balance, I think. I really care about stuff that I put out there, if you like. And so, you know, ever since I did Paul O'Grady show back in, God, 10 years ago, or maybe even more, it was terrifying. You know, I don't like doing all that stuff particularly. But as in terms of educating the public, raising awareness, making a difference, that's more important than how I feel about it. And I'd be behind the curtain about to go into my pet clinic, 5-6 million people watching Channel 4, you'd have the audience. Now, I'm massive comedy obsessive, so working with someone like Paul O'Grady was just a dream come true in terms of setting him up for a joke, and he'd pretty much almost always set me up for something funny to say. So it was great to have an audience reaction, but obviously to be professional as well, and that obviously helped the nerves. But, you know, live TV is pretty terrifying, but you're there to do a job and you're there to raise awareness. And, you know, everything that, as I say, put out there has to be perfect. So it goes, so everything has to be researched properly, and every aspect and every possibility of a question that comes back to you has to be covered. And that's what takes all the time. And there's nothing worse than coming away from a situation, whether it's a TV thing or a radio thing, or, you know, something that we're doing today, for example, going, I wish I'd said that, and I wish I'd done that. That's the worst. So you prepare as much as you possibly can and do the best job you can too, because at the end of the day, what you're saying is affecting animals' lives, and that's what you're doing it for in the first place. And it all boils down to that. Everything I do boils down to that. So yeah, it's fascinating. It's fun to be in the media sometimes, because you can improve animals' lives and raise awareness. You know, even on Paul O'Grady, you know, check under your rabbit's bum twice a day in summer for, you know, for maggots, you know, microchip, you know, simple messages that people just need to hear a few times to make them do it. But it is a huge responsibility that I never ever take lightly. And the more my career's gone on, the more weight has been given to the stuff I'm involved with in the media. So it's animal welfare, but it's also now legislation. It's also now talking about MPs. It's also, you know, relationship with number 10, etc. But I find it fascinating because it's all driven by my passion for animals, which started at 3 years old when I, apparently, my mum tells me, took a maggot out of my pet tortoise's leg in the garden with a twig, and I just wanted to help animals. So it's come from that, a very organic beginning, to now, you know, influencing animal welfare on a much, much bigger scale, which I love, but it's not easy sometimes.
Comes with different pressures. And I think on that basis, I suppose being in the TV, the media, being such a person that's looked up to with everything when it comes to welfare and campaigns, how do you find the pressure of negativity? So whether that's online trolls, or whether it's even just from seeing or hearing about some of the terrible stories that you do read online from puppy farms or animal cruelty, how do you find that you're able to distance that? And is that very different from, you know, an everyday person with regards to negativity? Does it ramp up?
It ramps up in a sense that, you know, I haven't vetted for 2 years. I've been pretty much a full-time campaigner in that time. There's no such thing as a day off, really, especially, you know, in your mind. And I often find, you know, when people are criticized, and bearing in mind I had no idea about campaigning or politics when I started all this, and then people sort of jump on and they'll say, but what about that? Or that needs to be done, or why haven't you done that yet? And you just think, well, why don't you do it? You know, I don't think I physically can't do anymore. Then you have people that go, oh, we told you that was going to happen, or Lucy's Law's brought in and there's still puppy farming. That was the one. And you just think, hang on a minute, murder's been illegal, I think, for quite a long time, but people are still killing people. Just because a law comes in doesn't mean everyone now behaves themselves, because otherwise there'd be no crime, there'd be no speed cameras, there'd be no need for court cases, there certainly wouldn't be a need for police. But now we've got a bit of legislation that can now be used. And there's so many people, fascinating how even campaigners who were fighting for what we were fighting for are so quick to troll, to comment, to ignore the truth, and to go, oh, we told you so, and all this sort of stuff. And, you know, me and my group of campaigners, you know, Linda and Sue in Wales, we've got Julia in Folkestone, we did have Philippa in Sheffield, she sadly passed away a few years ago, Sarah Clover in Staffordshire. We're all geographically distributed around the UK, but we all work together as a team to do the best that we can and to never give up. And to be honest with you, I think with Lucy's Law coming into 4 countries, the Ban Puppy Imports campaign, we think being successful later this year, we just can't do enough. We don't think we can do more in terms of the progress that we've made. But we still get criticism, we still get odd comments, and we still get that, but what about that? Or you should be doing that. And, and my answer really is, anyone can campaign. So instead of those few seconds when you said you should do that, or there's a loophole, or we told you so, why not actually write to an MP or start changing that yourself if you're not happy with it? I think being a sort of a leader of the campaign, it's a blessing and a curse, because people see you as someone that can be successful in campaigning, basically, which is great, and it's a huge compliment. But anyone can do it, and to be honest with you, it does affect you, because you've got 100 people telling you well done, congratulations, and they've all been part of the campaign. And I try so hard to empower people with ownership of campaigns, you know, signing and sharing petitions. We've all done it. People power, Lucy's Law, you know, there's no, my name's not associated with that, you know, it's not Mark's Law or Mark the Vet's Law. I'm always conscious of it being a movement that's owned by the people rather than anything different. So I think that, I don't know where I'm going with this, but my point is everyone has the resources to do it. I learned the hard way, and you know, there's no excuse for people not doing it themselves. That's my point. So don't criticize people when they're working every hour of the day to do as much as they possibly can. Why don't you get off your bottom and start campaigning yourself, make progress yourself, maybe front a campaign, maybe join a campaign, but don't criticize people who are putting everything, you know, their resources into something.
Absolutely. And we're going to come on to sport in a second, and just kind of what people can do, because I think there is a big part of that, to see kind of how difficult it really is to start doing those small things that lead to these big changes. Whilst we are still on the topic of mental health, and obviously the pressures and the expectation to deliver results and new laws being passed, what does Mark do to switch off? You mentioned earlier about finding that balance. What's a normal day outside of campaigning? What do you find that helps?
So my switching off things, I'm very lucky to live in Brighton, first of all, and I think especially during lockdown, to have the sea on our doorstep down here is amazing. For the horizon, for the sunrises, for the sunsets, seriously, for mental health, it's amazing. It couldn't be better. And then of course you've got, you know, swimming in the sea as well. I've kind of took up photography in a weird way in the first lockdown with all the sunsets, and managed to get one of my pictures with a dog in it into the Brighton photography calendar. I have a personal trainer, so I train, you know, 2 to 3 times a week to keep fit and do my weights. Over the last lockdown, people who follow me on Twitter will have noticed I'm obsessed with the starling murmuration, which is the group of starlings that sort of form these incredible clouds and then they roost under the pier for the night. So I made a TV program about that, socially distanced, with a load of people that were also fascinated by it, and that just actually went out live the other day, and it's on the latest.co.uk website. There's a link to watching the 48-minute program. Football is a big part of my life, and as we chatted before we went live, I actually used to support Arsenal, but I've switched to support Brighton, where I live, and I'm a season ticket holder. But I watch every single game that's on, whether it's domestic, international, I don't care. It has to be on. And then countryside walks, you know, living in Brighton, we've got the South Downs as well as the sea on our doorstep. And I make a point of pretty much every week or 2 weeks going into the South Downs, some incredible walks, Cookmere Haven, for example, places near Alfriston, And that I'm never happier unless I'm walking in the South Downs, I think, or on the beach, or just something.
And it's beautiful. I mean, it's the perfect spot for it. It's lovely. It's absolutely lovely down there, and I think it's so important. But you don't have a dog. You don't have a dog yourself.
I don't have a dog because I just haven't got the lifestyle at the moment that can accommodate it. It's so intense with all the campaigning. But to be honest with you, when the puppy imports campaign is successful, that's me done for fronting campaigns. And then I'm going to take a kind of a back step, really, and I'm going to consider adopting a dog. And I would go for a rescue greyhound, I think. I'm obsessed with rescue greyhounds. I'm so jealous of people when I'm out walking who have them. So that will be my dog of choice if and when I get one, yeah.
Amazing. Well, look, you mentioned about obviously support, and I think this is a really, really good point. Whilst we have sort of 15 minutes or so, what we can do to help. So let's start off with that. We spoke about campaigns. People may be looking at this going, 6 years, 10 years to have a law passed. I don't have that amount of time or that amount of commitment. Bearing in mind, this is not something that they will get paid for. This is on top of the stresses of everyday life. What advice can you give to people at the moment to make a change? What can they do?
When I was working full time, every day off, I used to go to Westminster, and that was up from Brighton. So that was fairly easy. So you can go to Westminster, obviously, when it opens back up again, and actually meet your MP or other MPs. And if it depends if you want to lead a campaign, start a campaign, or just join someone else's. But meeting MPs is definitely accessible to everybody, and a lot of people may not realise that. Your MP, you don't have to go to Westminster. You can. They usually have what's called a surgery on a Friday or a Saturday, or sometimes both, in your constituency, that you can book an appointment and just talk to your MP about something. And they are the ultimate decision makers. Obviously, then it goes into departments and the Prime Minister. But start, if you're going to be parliamentary and political, start with the MP. It depends if you're trying to change legislation, or you're trying to raise awareness, or change public behaviour, or all three, in terms of Lucy's Law. But the real basics is you can just share stuff on social media. So there's some really good campaigns at the moment. You've got the pet theft reform campaign, which is trying to make pet theft a specific offence. You've got a campaign to make microchipping, a central microchipping database, to make scanning microchips compulsory on first visit to the vet, to ban greyhound racing, which I'm obviously behind, to ban the import of cropped ears on dogs. And most campaigns have hashtags. So you've got pet theft reform, make chips count, ban greyhound racing, flop not crop. Every campaign has its own hashtag, so it's easy to find them on social media. But you could if you could be lying in bed in the morning or at night and just share stuff, that takes less than a second, and you'll be helping with the campaign, especially when it's petition links. But petitions again are brilliant to start. They raise awareness. They can get a debate in Westminster at 100,000 signatures. They get a response from the government at 10,000 signatures. Again, accessible to everyone. You can do events, rallies. I set up Pup Aid, 12 years ago now, which was a dog show with celebrities judging to raise awareness and again change human behaviour, public behaviour about the correct way to get a dog, which is to see the puppy with its mum or go to rescue. So there's loads of stuff, and always remember, whether it's MPs or celebrities or anyone you ask to help, they are also gaining from it. They are looking good from supporting a dog welfare campaign or a cat welfare campaign or any campaign. So there's loads of stuff that we can all do. The tools are out there. I started in 2013 in Parliament, but I started in 2009 with my dog shows. And I was so inexperienced when I went to Westminster the first time to meet an MP called Neil Parish, who's now the chair of the Ep3 Select Committee. I was so inexperienced. I took my mum and my grandma with me. It was like we were tourists in Westminster. I didn't know what was going on in there. So it just shows how you can go from knowing nothing. I mean, I grew up watching Spitting Image. That was my only connection with Parliament. Knowing nothing about campaigning or politics to, sourcing the Prime Minister's dog, Dylan, for him and his fiancée, Carrie. And just having them on WhatsApp, sending me pictures of the dog and the baby. It's just incredible what progress you can make in terms of if you're prepared for the the long game, which we told,
and I think that's a really key point on this as well. You don't have to have this huge understanding of politics.
You really
don't have to really be so into it. But if you're passionate about something and you genuinely feel like there is a better way that something can be done, or ways that people can be acting, that's enough to at least make a start. And like you said, it's movement.
That is so vital. So yeah, be prepared for the long game. If what you're campaigning for is the right thing to do, as you say, you don't need a background in politics. You just need to be very, very determined to get it over the line. Be prepared for the long game, as we've mentioned a few times. But do not go off that simple mission statement of what you want to do. For us, it was to ban the sale of third-party commercials, puppies and kittens, and we never compromised on that. And boy, were people putting pressure on us to change stuff, or completely rename the campaign or change its direction, but we never did. And that in itself shows that you're determined to get it over the line, because you see other campaigns giving into pressure and they're not successful. At the end of the day, when they are successful after that campaign has changed names and hashtags and all the rest of it, motives, it's not the campaign that was started in the first place. So what's the point? So you just need to gather enough evidence. You need to go through all the motions. You need to fail a few times, which we did many times with our campaign, in terms of being blocked and being sabotaged. And really what we did with Lucy's Law is we just tried every way possible to get it to make progress. And every time we blocked, we just had to do something else. So it was really, now everyone knows the tools that are available, but back then it was like, even an e-petition was new. So we've evolved, we've learned, and we've tried to share as much as possible with people when appropriate, so other people can feel what it's like to get involved with campaigning and get on with their own stuff.
And I suppose a good question off the back of that. Obviously, things have changed so much over the years, as you mentioned, but if you were going back 10 years and you still wanted to get the same results, still going to push through, obviously, the ban of third-party selling, is there stuff you would do differently? Or is there anything that you feel could have shaved off a few years to really kind of keep momentum up? It's
such a good question. It's such a good question. And to be honest with you, I probably wouldn't change anything, because to achieve what our little group of grassroots campaigners achieved and how we did it is just the sense of achievement, considering the 10 years of depression, anxiety, loss of sleep. I mean, it's horrible. Campaigning sounds fun, and you hang out with Ricky Gervais, or you go to Downing Street, but 98% of campaigning is horrible, stressful, donkey work, stuff that people don't see behind the scenes. 6 hours of sending the same email to different MPs. So when you've gone through that, the 300 visits to Westminster, etc., and you achieve a legislation change because you've stuck to your guns, you don't really want to change anything before. But I would say for people, if they are starting out and you are looking to change legislation, there's loads of things you can do, even things like watching Question Time, having like BBC Parliament on in the background. Learn the language of Parliament with respect. I think the Right Honourable Gentleman will agree with me when I say this. There's so many tricks in language, and I was terrible at English, even though I've just written a book, 3.
We'll come on to that, Mark.
This is my point. You just sort of evolve and become good at stuff that you didn't exist before. But if you learn the language of Parliament, that definitely helps, and that would have been much more helpful at the beginning. But you just pick up stuff and just sort of move along. And at the end of the day, and I've said this a few times when people have asked, with regard to the campaigning side of things, your brain turns into that wall in a room where, in Homeland or 24 or any box set, they burst into that psychopath or serial killer, and it's just post-it notes and newspaper articles and string connecting everything. And that becomes your campaigning brain. You know the names of the MP's pets. You can just literally get stuff that's been said in debates, and locate it, and you become this sort of mishmash of information that at the end of the day is all helpful to your campaign. And read over, if you are thinking about campaigning, find the debates that have already happened in the last 10 years and who's contributed to them, which MPs. There's about 150 MPs, I would say, that are passionate about animal welfare and will always sort of turn out. So you focus on them, and yeah, there's loads of tricks and how you can empower them and take them with you on the journey, because it's the relationship building in Westminster. If you're thinking about changing legislation, the relationship building is what takes the most time, without a doubt. And
yeah,
it can be done. It just everything has to be tweaked to that MP to make them feel special and to make them feel empowered and part of it, and that they're an individual rather than you're sending the same stuff again and again. So when I said about the 6 hours sending it same email, the content's the same, but you're tweaking everything in the first line to be more relevant to that MP. That's the secret. It's personalization and relationship building.
And I think there's principles of that can be taken, you know, away from campaigning and just everyday life. Perhaps, you know, even trying to find a puppy, for example, you know, do the research, really spend the time. There's so many bits. Knowing where we are for time, Mark, there's a couple of things I want to talk about. We spoke about, obviously, a second ago, some books. So you've got 2 books out at the moment. You're bringing out another book as well. What's different about this book? What can you tell us about it?
Just so happen to have one here.
Cue, Mark.
So this is Lucy's Law. I mean, we've talked about how long it took, but this is kind of the story of it, from Lucy's life to all the campaigning, to all the celebrities that are involved, to all the obstructions and the sabotage and the blocking, and to how we eventually got it over the line. This came out a year ago, and it's doing really well. And to be honest with you, obviously it's great to read about little Lucy and her life, and especially what goes into rehabilitation of dogs that have come out of puppy farms and the whole foster network, and also Lisa and how she turned Lucy into kind of a celebrity dog. But there's so many tips in here of how to campaign and what we had to do to get stuff done. So it's kind of a book for everyone, really, especially animal lovers or people that are fans of beating injustice to animals. So I recommend it, Lucy's Law, the story of a little dog who changed the world. And when I decided on calling the law Lucy's Law, and I went to Lisa to ask permission, Lucy's owner, and I said, if this is successful, your dog will be the dog that changes the world. And it was quite an emotional moment.
Brilliant.
Which I still chokes me now, but it's true. And she did change the world, and we're still changing the world. And it's, you know, we just haven't given up, and we won't, because there's still a few things that need to be done, like the puppy import campaign, for example. And with the help of everyone, yourself and people listening and people who sign and share petitions and MPs and celebrities, you can do anything. And we've proved it with this. And yeah, I encourage anyone who wants to change something to, instead of blaming and finger pointing and getting angry with people, to grab that energy and time, because all that trolling and negativity takes time and energy, and try and switch it for positive, constructive energy. Contact your MP, set up a campaign, share other people's campaigns, or loads of other stuff you can do. And to be honest with you, if you do follow that sort of positive path, you're then helping to change the world and improve it, rather than keep it negative and bring other people down with you. And I think if we
doing your bit at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah, my point is, everyone can do something. Everyone can do something. Retweeting something to setting up a leading campaign, that whole spectrum of stuff that we can do. And if we engaged in that stuff rather than the trolls and the negativity, I think we'd have a better environment to live in, not just for us, but for our animals as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Tonight is the last AppDog event. Tell us very quickly, what is AppDog? How can people
I'm happy to
join?
Go on, by the way.
Seen the participants just start dropping off at lunchtime. No, but it is an important one, because I know there is such an important campaign, obviously, or it's such an important message, should I say, with tonight's event. Tell us very quickly.
AppDog is a what's called an APPG. It's an all-party parliamentary group, which is an official group set in Westminster that concentrates on topics. So I run the dog welfare one, and we oversee lots of different campaigns, and we have online events. For more information, you can go to appdog.co.uk, AppDog, so all party dog advisory welfare group. And basically we have events, and we've covered all sorts of contentious subjects like brachycephalic dogs and the pandemic puppies. demand. And tonight we're looking at Romanian and other overseas rescues and what can be done to benefit their welfare, rescues that are adopted. We've got 10 guest speakers. It's going to be hectic, but it's free. I always wanted to make AppDog inclusive. And if you sign up to AppDog, if you go to the website and sign up to our free newsletter, which drives me mad, but I write every month, it's so long. I also list the most important petitions or the most relevant petitions at the moment that people can get behind, and campaign news from other campaigns. So people can really get involved at that level. And I think if you support AppDog or follow us on Twitter, follow me on Twitter, Marc the Vet, MARC, you already get a feel of what's going on in the campaign world, who to follow, people like Peter Egan, Jordan Shelley, Dr. Dan Allen. You know, there's some fantastic campaigners out there who are kind of not doing all the work for you, but who you can look at and whose campaigns you can follow and support and share. Because there's a few of us mad enough to front these campaigns, which is, you know, it is an honor, especially when you make progress, but we can't do it unless everyone sort of gets behind us and signs and shares the petitions and you know, and just wants that change as much as we all do. And as I say, it can be done. And with social media especially, which we didn't have this type of social media even 10 years ago, what you can achieve is mind-blowing just by sort of sharing petitions, for example, and information. So change, the potential for change has never been better in terms of what's achievable. And I urge everybody, if you see something you don't like or you're not unhappy with or uncomfortable with, you can change it. It's possible. We've proved it. And read the book, talk to other campaigners and find out how you can get involved and change that too.
Well, it's superb, Marc. We're going to be sending a follow-up, obviously, where people can watch back, take certain points from this as well. But there'll be links to AppDog. There'll be links to, obviously, all these upcoming campaigns. So if there is any other questions, please do send them through to us. And if we can't answer them, we'll obviously help try and source those answers as well. But Marc, a massive thank you from everyone, obviously not just for being here today, but the ongoing support that you constantly give for the welfare of animals, especially obviously dogs, which is such a big important part of not just our company but me personally as well. Keep up the amazing work, and hopefully we'll come and have some strolls in Brighton at some point and show us some of those photos. But thanks so much for joining us, Marc, and hopefully we'll get a chance to get you back on soon as well.
Yeah, it'd be a pleasure and an honour to come back maybe in a few months and give you another update. But thanks, Ashley, and everyone associated for inviting me on. It's been really fun, and I love the fact that you're so interested in campaigning, because it is an interesting sphere. And I'm enthusiastic because it still feels relatively new to me. And the more people that get involved, the quicker the world changes and the better we look after animals and ourselves. So thanks, Pausing Work. Thanks, Ashley. And thanks, everyone, for listening in. And also thanks for signing and sharing the petitions so far, and for all those of you that will sign them well into the future as well. And always remember to share them as well.
That's the important bit. Well, look forward to AppDog tonight, and we'll speak soon. All right.
All right. Thanks, Ashley. Thanks,
all the
everybody.
Best. Cheers.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
See you later.